Fatoumata, welcome to Tech Trends.
Thank you so much, CFA.
The internet has been awash with issues around data breaches, privacy issues, and even election interference. How do you react to all of this?
A very serious situation now, because when we look at it in our context in Africa, it is real. I mean, we talked about fake news all the time, and we talk about how perception that being shipped when it comes to elections, and now there's elections coming up as well. So it's a major topic, and definitely there has to be some kind of process or systems or so that will be in place to make sure that the integrity of elections are kept. And how that's going to happen, it's not majority just going to be on technology. Obviously, it has to be some form of interaction with humans, and so I am very concerned that not so much of the fact that we have these issues, but how we're going to deal with tackling the issue, and the how can determine the future of technology and its role in our enabling culture. So I think for me it's more of how we're going to deal with it.
So tell me, just how safe is the average internet user today?
It depends on where that average internet user is. It's all about education. What am I getting into? What am I looking for? What is the service that I'm looking for? And what am I giving up to get the service? I believe in Africa we have a huge exposure on whether or not things can go really wrong, because we usually don't educate our users. Those parameters for security, privacy, confidentiality are already in apps that have been built, because that is the protocol we have. However, how educated am I as a user to make sure that I'm executing those things to protect myself? And I think we are quite exposed in Africa because of the education of how we engage and interact with technology in our privacy, our confidentiality, and exposure to our own data out there.
Now the user is faced with the situation where they willfully hand over their data for whatever reason, and these companies make money from their data. Are you okay with this model, or you think it needs to change?
Well, you have to pay for a service. You know, it was interesting because I was listening to the Facebook CEO talk about his service and what they offer the user of Facebook. And it's logical, you know, you want to use my platform, I'm not charging you anything, but we're in agreement that you're going to give me certain information that I can actually use to market. Therefore, there's someone subsidizing, if you will, the fact that you're using the service. Now, if for some reason the user is getting on the service without knowing the full disclosure of what's going to happen, that's wrong. But if you are aware that you're going to come onto a platform, and the platform is offering you this for something like your information, and they're going to use that information to market certain things to you or to create certain products or whatever the reason might be, then it's a fair trade. You know, you give me something, I give you something. The model might change somewhat, where if I were to get onto a platform like Facebook, for example, and they decide that they've put some mechanism in place where my data cannot be used, I might have to pay to opt out. And it's fair, because that's revenue that the company has to have to continuously give me that service. And that revenue has to come from somewhere, either me or someone else.
How do you think we should respond to issues of data breaches and other forms of threats in Africa?
Well, there are so many things when we talk about the internet. I mean, first of all, when we say cybersecurity, for example, what does that mean? What it means is that we are putting certain things in place, okay? The ability for the internet to be accessible, it should have integrity, right? and it also should be confidential. So we kind of talk about the ICA, that's what it's called, you know, integrity, confidentiality, and then availability, right? And with that, protocols that have come across in many ways, whether it's the EU1 or the PCI-DSS, it puts some protocols in place that enable some security for us interacting on the internet. We do have the situation where when we interact with the internet, for example, we are giving information or we are sharing information. We are also accepting information. As the African user, we need to educate our users so they understand that, because for us in technology, we understand that the weakest link is always the human. If we can educate our users in Africa of what it means to be on the internet, when you share something, what does that mean? Where does it go? How do you record it? How do you recall or delete it and all of that? And then also put policies in place like the EU is doing to help protect our own users on the continent, because Africa has its own context when it comes to how we use technology. Today we know that smartphone is the way we access the internet. The rest of the world, they use computers, they use tablet, they use all kinds of other instruments, to access the internet. So we need to make sure that our protection of our users on the continent is specific to our context, and that we're not eliminating or getting rid of the ability for people to innovate, for the creativity to continuously happen with all the rules and regulations and policies that might be coming into play just to protect privacy. We might lose some of those things that will be innovative for the future of our technology within Africa.
Do you think Nigeria and other African nations are prepared for any major cyber attack?
Are ready? Exposed, yes. Ready? Depends. It depends. Because you have to understand that the cyber attack that we have, it's very agile. The more we integrate, the more we have systems talking to systems, you will always be vulnerable. So to be 100% secure, it's a myth. I mean, it is. It's not. It's a myth. It's not a reality, because every day your vulnerability are changing. They might not increase, but they're changing. So you might have a vulnerable spot on the back end one day, and you might seal it. Maybe it comes to the front. Maybe it goes to the side. And so you're constantly having to make sure you're monitoring. You have things like ransomware, where someone came up with, and back in the day we used to worry about configure. Now we got ransomware, where someone decided that they're going to take your entire, lock down your entire organization data, and you have to pay them to get the data. We see almost 26 or 27% happening in healthcare, right? Collecting people data and saying, look, pay me up to almost $10,000 for me to release your data, or else you can't function. So you have a constant, and then you have phishing. Phishing is where someone is sitting there just looking for any loophole to come through, and they're in. They can do it in the financial sector, they can do it in the healthcare, it could be in oil and gas. So once they get in, you don't know what they're going to do. It can be malicious. It could be just, oh, I want to steal something and just leave. So to be able to say we're fully locked down, tight, it's not going to happen. What we need to do is be constantly on the watch.
My guest has clearly stressed the need for you to be more security conscious, because it is your responsibility as well. The recent Cambridge Analytica issue shows what is possible in today's world and how scary things might be in the future. Our hope is that the Nigerian state is not caught napping at any point. Thank you for watching the show today. Please follow us on social media And don't forget, you can watch these and previous editions of the show on the Channels TV YouTube account or via my blog, cfatech.ng. For Tech Trends, I'm Chukwemeka Agbata.